So we're continuing our journey with Peter in our series, Screw Upward. And have you ever done something that you swore you would never do? You would never be that type of person. You would never, ever fall into that. And you could never imagine yourself ever doing that. And then you did it. And you're like, oh man, I can't believe that I'm the type of person that could do that. For me, that came in the realm of parenting. So many of you know I'm trained in coaching parents, and I know like all the research about spanking. And I knew I'm not going to be a parent that spanks. You know, I know the research on it. I know that it's ineffective for learning because it's registered as a threat. I know what it does to the brain. And as a follower of Jesus, I practiced the way of nonviolence. So I knew all the right things. And then one day when my daughter Imogen was 3, we were just having one of those moments where it just kept getting worse and worse. And I was repeating myself and she was getting upset and she was kind of like that, you know, like really frustrated. I get it. And it escalated to the point where we don't even know what happened. But then I warned her and then I spanked her just once. And she looked at me shocked and she went, "You hit me." And I looked at her, I went, "I know, I'm so sorry." And then we both burst into tears and we're weeping. And I have to tell her, like, Mom was wrong. Hands are not for hitting. Even mom hands are not for hitting. And I have to tell you, 8 years later, it is still hard for me to tell you that story because I never imagined that I would be a parent who would ever spank my child, especially in a moment of anger, like all of the things. And there I was, the person that I never imagined I could be. I believed all the right things and I was committed to all the right things. I knew all the right things, and yet I screwed up. And I'm sure that you can relate, right? You can't believe you did whatever your fill in the blank is, right? Whatever that is. And when you did it, what did you want to do? You wanted to hide. You were so ashamed. You were so embarrassed. You were so distraught with this picture of how far you fell short of who you thought that you would be. And I mean, this is the reason why we have the gospel. We know this, right? The gospel is because humans screw up and they mess up, and we need Jesus to be able to overcome that. And so we know that there's a sin problem. Francis Buford, he says, sin is the human propensity to make a mess of things, to mess everything up, as we would say, to screw everything up. And so we know that in general, but when we have to come face to face with our own sin problem, we're like, ooh, I don't like that. That doesn't feel good, right? When we realize, oh, I need the gospel. I need Jesus to do something for me. I am not complete all on my own. It's not a great feeling, right? And we can especially see this for Peter when he had to experience his own need of how he was not someone who he thought he was going to be. He thought he would be the most faithful, the most devoted, and then he ends up being the one who screws it up the most. So we're going to walk through the worst night of Peter's life, And it starts with what Pastor Ashley just read around the foot washing. And Jesus, he takes off his outer robe at this Last Supper with his disciples, and he starts washing their feet. And Ashley actually talked about this a few sermons ago, too, that this was unheard of. Like, no one who was in a higher position washed the feet of someone, even who was a peer, let alone who was lower than them. We have no other example in all of history of anyone in an elevated position at Jesus' time doing this. This is unprecedented. So he is just flipping the norms of what everybody knows. And he comes to Peter, and this happens. When Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" And Jesus replied, "You don't understand what I'm doing now, but you will understand later." "No," Peter said, "you will never wash my feet." And Peter is adamant here. Like when Jesus comes to him, it's like this shock. Are you going to wash my feet? Like this is unheard of. Like no way. And then he says, "Never, ever," like never in a million years. It is incredibly emphatic. Like never, ever, ever, ever will I allow that to happen. So Peter, he believes he's being the most devoted. Like, I could never allow Jesus to do this for me. And then Jesus says, "Unless I wash you, you won't have a place with me." And Simon Peter said, Lord, not only my feet, but my hands and my head. And Jesus responded, those who have bathed need only to have their feet washed because they are completely clean. You disciples are clean, but not every one of you. And so Peter, after Jesus says, like, listen, Peter, if I don't wash your feet, you have nothing to do with me. Peter's like, okay, all of me, wash all of me, everything. And Jesus basically is like, settle down, Peter, take a seat. You don't understand what I'm about to do. You have no idea what's going on here. And Peter, rather than listening, because Jesus is saying, you don't understand right now, but you will at one point. And Peter just keeps going. He's like, no, then do this and do this. He's so busy telling Jesus what he should be doing that he's not listening. And then Jesus goes on to explain why he washed their feet. He says, I have set for you an example. If I, who am your teacher and your master, have washed your feet, if I have lowered myself to the place of a servant, how much more should you do this for one another? That's what I'm asking you to do. And then he goes on, and remember, this is his last meal. He knows what's coming. He knows he's going to the cross. He knows that the foot washing is a sign for what Jesus is about to do for them, and they don't understand it, but they will at some point. And imagine if you knew that you were going to have your last meal with the people you loved, that you've spent every day with, you would want to say the most important things. And so Jesus goes on to say the most important thing is, and he says, little children, I'm with you for a little while longer. You will look for me, but just as I told the Jewish leaders, I will also tell you, where I'm going, you can't come. I give to you a new commandment, love each other. Just as I have loved you, so you also must love one another. This is how everyone will know that you are my disciples, when you love each other. And so Jesus tells them how to be his disciples, and he ups the ante here. It's no longer love your neighbor as yourself. It's no longer love someone as you want to be loved. He says, no, love one another as I have loved you. And they don't fully understand what that's going to mean. That's what the cross is going to display. Jesus has been talking about this and telling them, like, no one has a greater love than this, to lay down their life for their friends. The Son of Man is going to lay down his life and pick it back up. No one takes it from me. I'm willingly doing that. He's been telling them what's coming, and they're not getting it. But he's saying there's a new way to love, a new standard for loving. And it's not how you want to be loved or how you think others should be loved. It is how I have loved you. But instead of Peter listening, right, because Peter's not good at that, Peter starts to react from his feelings because he doesn't like what he's hearing. He doesn't like the message. And so Simon Peter said to Jesus, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus answered, where I am going, you can't follow me now, but you will follow later. And Peter asked, Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will give up my life for you. And Jesus replied, will you give your life for me? I assure you that you will deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And so Peter's like, where are you going? Where are you going? And why can't I come with you? I'm ready to go. Let's go right now. Just like with washing his feet, Jesus is saying, you don't understand right now. You can't come now. You'll come later. Like, pay attention. But Peter's not good at paying attention. Peter's good at telling Jesus what he should be saying and doing and thinking. And so that's what Peter's doing here. Like, no, but I'm ready to lay down my life for you. He professes this amazing devotion. And Jesus' response to him is almost incredulous. Like, you're going to lay down your life for me? Like, almost, when Peter's like, you're going to wash my feet? Jesus is like, you're going to lay down your life for me? I tell you what, no, that's not what's going to happen. Tonight, actually, you're going to deny me 3 times. Because Peter, he's missing the whole point here. Because it's not about what he's going to do for Jesus, right? That's what he's all about. This is what I'm going to do for you. I am so devoted. I will stick with you through everything. I'll go wherever you're going. It's about what Jesus is going to do for him. But in this way, because he keeps focusing on the wrong things, this is the first way that Peter denies Jesus this night. And the first way that he denies Jesus is he denies the message of Jesus. He denies the message of Jesus because he's so busy telling Jesus what he should be doing and saying and what he wants to hear and what he doesn't like hearing, that again, he's missing what Jesus is trying to tell him. Jesus does not need Peter to lay down his life for him. Never once has he told his disciples, you know what, we're going to go on this mission and you're going to have to lay down your life for my cause and my purpose to defend me. Jesus has never once said that, but that's all Peter can think about because Jesus doesn't need Peter to do that, but Peter sure does need Jesus to do that for him, but he can't see it. He's missing the point. He doesn't like the message that he keeps hearing of Jesus talking about sacrifice. Again, Pastor Ashley talked about on Sunday how, he gets it right in one moment, but then he's like, no. When Jesus starts talking about sacrifice, Peter's like, no, never. And Jesus has to say, get behind me, Satan. Like, your mind is not fixed on the things of God. And so Peter keeps falling into this trap because he doesn't want to hear it. And we can deny Jesus in the same way. That we love Jesus and we want to follow Jesus, all the things we're going to do for Jesus. But then Jesus starts saying things and we're like, I don't like that part, Jesus. I don't like that message. That one's not so good. Let's skip over that one, right? Like forgiving. We don't want to talk about that, or generosity, or service, or humility, or sacrifice. All these things we're like, maybe not that. Like, I'll do anything for you, but I don't want to do that, Jesus. And so we can deny the message when we don't like it. And we can get caught up in what we're doing for Jesus that we miss what Jesus is actually asking us to do. And we're a lot like Peter, where we skip over the part that says, love others as I have loved you. We skip over that part and we just start saying, I'm going to love people as I think they should be loved. I'm going to do the things that I think should be done. And so that's the first way that Peter denies Jesus this night. He denies the message of Jesus, but it just gets worse for Peter. It doesn't get much better. So Jesus keeps teaching his disciples after this point, but Peter gets silent. We don't hear from Peter again for the rest of this prayer and this conversation. And you can imagine he's probably like feeling pretty stung and feeling pretty hurt. Like, what? Jesus thinks I'm going to deny him? I just expressed my devotion to him. And so then after the supper, Jesus brings his disciples to the garden. And at the garden, Judas, who was one of Jesus' disciples who has betrayed him to the Jewish authorities, he comes along with all these authorities and these guards, and they have weapons and torches, and Jesus is not surprised. Jesus knows that this is going to happen, but Peter decides to take matters into his own hands. So we read, Jesus knew everything that was to happen to him, so he went out and asked, "Who are you looking for?" And they answered, "Jesus the Nazarene." And he said to them, "I am." Judas, his betrayer, was standing with them. And when he said, "I am," they shrank back and fell to the ground. And he asked them again, "Who are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus the Nazarene." He answered, "I told you, I am. If you are looking for me, let these people go." This was so that the word he had spoken might be fulfilled. I didn't lose any one of those whom you gave me. And then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus told Peter, "Put your sword away. Am I not to drink the cup the Father has given me?" And so Jesus, again, he knows what's going to happen. He is not surprised, and he is not resisting these men who come with evil intentions. Jesus is not putting up a resistance, but Peter doesn't like what's happening. So Peter draws a sword. It's probably much more like a large knife, and he clumsily comes to Jesus' defense and cuts off the ear of Malchus, the servant of the high priest. And Jesus right away is like, stop it, put that away. In the Gospel of Matthew, in this account, Jesus says those who live by the sword will die by the sword. In the Gospel of Luke, in this account, we read that Jesus goes and heals the ear of the man who had it cut off. Like, Jesus is enough of this. Enough. This is not the way. And this is the second way that Peter denies Jesus this night. He denies the example of Jesus. He denies the example because Peter, he sees himself as the most faithful, the most devoted. He's the quickest to act, and he's always going to be there. But in this moment, we see that he hasn't really been paying attention because Jesus never once in all of his ministry ever resorted to violence or condoned violence. When he himself was threatened with violence, when he was threatened by other people, he never once used violence. Even when his disciples are like, "Hey, do you want us to call down thunder and lightning on these people who have denied you?" He's like, no, you don't do that. And so Peter, he's been missing the whole way that Jesus has been teaching them, Jesus literally just set an example for them. He said, I have given you an example of how to live, to serve one another. He washed the feet of the person who was going to betray him. He washed Judas's feet. He ate with Judas that night. He says, love one another as I have loved you. And Peter misses the whole point, and he does not follow the example of Jesus. And we can deny Jesus in the same way. When we choose the way of violence or the way of selfishness in our thoughts, in our words, and our deeds, and we deny Jesus' example in large and small ways, these ways that we never really thought that we would, being unfaithful in your marriage, stretching the truth to impress someone else, letting your anger get the best of you, taking what's not yours, holding on to vengeance and refusing to forgive, hoarding your money and possessions, speaking ill of someone else. All of these ways we deny the example that Jesus has set for us. And just like what happens with Peter and Malchus, when we go our own way, when we choose to go our way instead of the example of Jesus, people get hurt. People get hurt. And so that's the second way that Peter denies Jesus. But again, it just gets worse for Peter. So Jesus, he's seized by this group of people and brought to the house of the high priest, and this sham of a trial starts. I mean, just the fact that it's happening at night, trials didn't happen at night, so all of this is just shady and underhanded. And John and Peter are following Jesus at a distance, and we read this. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus, and because this other disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. However, Peter stood outside near the gate. Then the other disciple, the one known to the high priest, came out and spoke to the woman stationed at the gate, and she brought Peter in. And the servant woman stationed at the gate asked Peter, "Aren't you one of this man's disciples?" "I am not," Peter replied. And the servants and the guards made a fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it warming themselves, and Peter joined them there, standing by the fire and warming himself. So again, Peter's following Jesus, and when he's finally let in, this servant girl asks him, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" And Peter is very quick, without hesitation, to go, nope, not me, not one of them. And this is a very low stakes situation here. This is a person who is lower class. This is a person who is a different gender. Women were not considered equal at all at this time. And so this is not someone who has any power or authority to do anything to Peter. And yet immediately, without hesitation, he denies Jesus. And during this time, so this happens, he goes by the fire, and Jesus is being interrogated. And he's being interrogated, and they're asking him about his teaching and his disciples. And he's honest about his teaching. And he said, I've not spoken in secret. I've been out in public in the daylight every day. Why did you not seize me then? But he doesn't give up his disciples. He protects his disciples. And he is struck in the face during this. He is being disparaged. And yet he is there telling the truth in a very high stakes situation. And then we go back to Peter. So John is masterful in the way that he weaves Peter and Jesus together in this scene. And we pick up Peter's story. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was standing with the guards warming himself. And they asked, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" And Peter denied it, saying, "I'm not." And a servant of the high priest, a relative to the one whose ear Peter had cut off, said to him, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" And Peter denied it again, and immediately a rooster crowed. And so Peter, he's standing with the enemies of Jesus by this fire. And the first time he's asked, again, like the second time, aren't you one of this guy's disciples? He's like, nope. And then the third time, a guy recognizes him. He's a relative of Malchus. He's like, wait a second, I saw you. And he doesn't just say, I saw you in the garden. He says, I saw you with him. You were on his side. And Peter denies it the third time. And John doesn't pick this up, but it's in all four gospel accounts. And there's not many stories that go across all four. This is one of them. And in all the other ones, he is emphatic when he denies. He makes a solemn vow. He curses and swears that he's not one of Jesus's disciples. He is convincing in this moment. And right when he does that, the rooster crows. And he begins to see that he was not willing to lay down his life for Jesus. When push came to shove, he actually protected his own life. And this is where we see the third way that Peter denies Jesus. And this is where he denies the person of Jesus. And he denies any association at all with Jesus. No, I'm not with him. I'm not one of his. And when that rooster crows, he has to come face to face with how deeply he has just screwed up, how bad it is, how he does not live up to his own hype in any way. And in John, he leaves it right there because John's going to pick up with Peter after the resurrection. But in all the other gospel accounts, it talks about how he went outside and he wept bitterly. And it is like he is distraught. It's not just like little tears. Like it is full out ugly crying, like so distraught, so ripped up about this moment because he has come face to face with how far he falls short of who he thought he was. He was going to be the most devoted. And instead, he's the one who denies Jesus 3 times. And the reality is we too can deny the person of Jesus. And sometimes that looks like just walking away from our faith and saying, I don't want anything to do with Jesus. But you're here on Good Friday, so I'm assuming you haven't done that. But we also deny Jesus when we choose our own comfort and other people's acceptance of us, and we fear the judgment of others. And so we downplay our association with Jesus. And we start to fit in with those around us, even if we know it's not right. So whether that's gossiping, or drinking too much, or speaking dishonorably, or dressing to fit in or get attention, or keeping silent in the face of injustice, all these ways we downplay and say, I'm not really with him. Don't associate me with him. And when we choose our own comfort and others' acceptance over that, it is a bitter realization when we recognize that Jesus is not our highest love and not our first loyalty. That's hard for us to see. And so we're not so different from Peter. It's often like we can think, I would never do that. I would never deny Jesus. But you know what? Peter was sincere in his desire to follow Jesus. He really thought that he was going to be the one to measure up. But it didn't work out that way because he didn't really understand what that meant to follow Jesus. He didn't get it in that moment. And he is distraught in this moment. He is distraught when he realizes the reality of his state. Even though he professed that it doesn't matter if everyone else falls away, if everyone else falls short, Jesus, not me. And then when it comes down to it, it's him first. It's him first. And that's a really hard thing to come face to face with. He's not who he thought he was. But here's the great thing about this story. Jesus knew that Peter's denial was coming. He was not surprised by it. It doesn't mean that the hurt of it didn't matter. It didn't mean that it wasn't something that disappointed Jesus in that moment. But Jesus knew this was coming, and Jesus had a vision for Peter on the other side of this. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says this, Simon, Simon, look, Satan has asserted the right to sift you all like wheat. However, I have prayed for you that your faith won't fail. And when you have returned, strengthen your brothers and sisters. So Jesus says to Peter, when you have returned, and that word to return means to turn back again, to turn around, to start going in the right direction. And he says, strengthen them, meaning make them stable, build them up, and make them firm in their faith. And Jesus is giving Peter a vision of what his real role will be. Because Peter, up until this point, has been like, I'm the best. I'm the best. I'm number one. Jesus, I'm your number one. I'm the guy who's going to get it right. Now Peter's seen like, nope, got it real wrong. And Jesus has this vision for Peter that when you have turned back after this moment, this dark, bitter moment in your life, when you have turned back, you will see that it is no longer to be better than everybody else. It is to come alongside everyone else. It is to encourage and bring everyone along with you. And so there is hope for Peter, even on the worst night of his life. And I want you to hear, there is hope for you, even in the worst moment of your life. Jesus still has a vision for you. Whatever mistakes you have made, whatever mistakes you are right in the middle of right now, whatever mistakes you are dealing with the aftermath of, Jesus is not done with you. He wasn't done with Peter, and he's not done with you. It doesn't mean that all the consequences of bad decisions just go away. I mean, sometimes you gotta live with whatever it is, but it doesn't mean that you're out. It doesn't mean that Jesus is like, too bad, you had your chance. You screwed it all up, and now you have to sit on the sidelines. That's not the vision that we get, because Peter really messed it up. He really fell short of who he was. And this is the terrible truth of the cross. The terrible truth of the cross is that you cannot be who you want to be, who you know you should be, all on your own. It is not about what you are going to do for Jesus. It is about what you desperately need Jesus to do for you. It is about how you cannot find life on your own apart from what he has done. That is the reality that Peter has to come face to face with, and it is the reality that we have to come face to face with. And Jesus willingly went to the cross. He willingly went to the cross to set us free from the power of sin and death, to help us to be all that he created us to be, to help us to have life and life in the fullest. That was his choice. And so tonight, I don't want us to rush to the resurrection. We want to get there. We know it's coming, right? And the resurrection, everything changes. I mean, it's amazing. When that morning, when Jesus is risen from the grave, changes our life. But tonight, I want us to come face to face with the things that we need to look at, the ways that we fall short. What we need Jesus to do for us, the burden that we need Jesus to take from us, the forgiveness that we're longing for, the ways that we have been denying Jesus, denying the message of Jesus or the example of Jesus or even the person of Jesus in our life. And so to close here in just a moment, we're going to do a couple things. One, we're going to read a confession together, and that's that printed confession. You're going to want to get that out. Because, that's part of this is us admitting how we need Jesus and doing that with one another. But also, after we do that confession, Steve is going to come up and read the crucifixion account from the Gospel of John, that we know where this story is going, what Peter is about to see, where it seems like everything is lost. Because they don't know at that moment that Jesus is going to be back on Sunday. They don't know that. In that moment, it looks like everything they had given their lives for, everything they believed in is gone. It's the darkest moment of our faith. And after Steve reads that that crucifixion account, Matt's going to do a musical reflection, just something that we get to absorb and let wash over us. But during that musical reflection, I want you to come up here. Excuse me. There's some markers. I want you to write down whatever it is that you need Jesus to take from you tonight. Whatever it is that you need to confess to him, whether it's a denial, whether it's a burden, whatever that is. And to write that down, take it, keep it with you. You write it, but take it back with you, because we're going to do something else with it before we end tonight. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. So let's pray together. Bring out your confession. I'll read the leader parts, and we'll read the all parts together. Okay? Here we go. Holy Spirit, grant each of us true conviction, leading to a true repentance. Indeed, it was our desire to serve you well this day, O God, but we have fallen short of your righteousness in our thoughts, our intentions, our actions, and our words. We have responded at times without grace. We have chosen sometimes that which leads neither to our own flourishing nor to the proclamation of your glory. Forgive us, O Lord, for our treasons, both known and unknown. Forgive us for the harm we have done, for the good we might have done but failed to do. Forgive us also for the constant condition of our hearts, for the self-serving impulses, inclinations, and desires which stand us in every moment in need of a Savior. God, be merciful to we who are sinners. Take joy, all you who are called by his name, for his mercies are already yours. Now may the grace of his forgiveness, which is always new for all his children, work powerfully in us, changing us into better image bearers of Christ and more faithful servants of our King. Let our inability to perfectly love you, O God, drive us daily to the arms of Christ, wherein the enormity of your mercy and the scandal of such grace lavished upon us would birth in us a new and greater affection for you, and a new and greater desire to do that which pleases you. Somehow use even our weaknesses for your glory. Now hear these words of favor, O children of God. All these sins you have truly repented of, he has eternally forgiven. They will never be held against you. You are free to love and serve him in joyful assurance, knowing his grace will always be more than sufficient for your own failings. Thanks be to Christ for this glorious gift.